Well, you probably know again here, because you're the best and brightest, what a vigilante is. Well, I bet you haven't really heard about this type of vigilante before, and it is causing havoc for as many as 40% of computers. Well, vigilantes have throughout history decided that they were going to take the law into their own hands. Now, way back when there wasn't law enforcement, etc., that's just what you did. And then we ended up with the tribes, and our tribes would decide, okay, what's going to happen to this person. And, one of the worst things that could possibly happen way back, caveman days and after, frankly, the worst thing that could happen to you is getting banished, because having a group of people who are living together, cooperating together, working together makes all of the difference when it comes to survival. And being kicked out of that tribe, out of that group, meant you had a very low chance of long-term survival. And if you went into another group, they'd really be suspicious about you, because where did you come from? Did somebody kick you out because you did something really, really bad? I kind of wonder if that's not deeply ingrained inside of us from all of those centuries, millennia, with that whole type of process in place where we see someone that's different than us and we kind of wonder, right? Do you think that's where that might have come from? Interesting thought. I don't know that I've ever seen any studies about that. So vigilantes nowadays are people who, they're not going to the chieftain. They're not going to the local police department or the prosecutor, whoever it might be. They are taking the law, as it were, into their own hands. Now, it's not necessarily even the law. They just decide that they want something to happen in a particular way. And by having it happen in that particular way, they now have control, right? They're making the law, as it were, not just enforcing it. We have a lot of malware out there, and there's a lot of different types. You might remember what Sony did. Sony decided they didn't like people ripping their CDs, and so they went ahead and installed an automatic installer for Windows computers. So if you tried to play your favorite Sony CD, right, audio CD, listen to some music, it would automatically install some, what you and I would call malware on your computer. And it would look at everything you were doing on your computer to try and make sure that you were not trying to make a copy of the disk. Not just a copy, but what we call ripping it. In other words, you have a CD and you have an MP3 player. How do you get the CD on the MP3 player? Because you can't just stick it into an MP3 player, so you have to rip it, and that converts it from the CD format into an MP3 format, so it's all digital. You can take it with you. And I have really griped about the music industry before, because they make way more money off of CDs than they ever did off of records, just because of how cheap it is. It costs them like 10 cents, not even, to make a CD, and it cost them a couple of bucks to make a record back in the day. So they decided they would do digital without thinking twice about, well, digital means you can make a perfect copy of that disk. And so Sony said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this. And so it installed itself way down deep inside the operating system. It watched as you loaded up disks, and it watched what you did. That is malware. And that was Sony being, frankly, a vigilante. Yeah, they said, hey, it's for copyright protection. But there was no encryption on CDs. There still isn't on compact discs when we're talking about music discs. There is encryption on DVDs, and that's what they did in order to say, well, you can't rip it because it's encryption, and they passed the Digital Communications Millennial Act, and then from that act, they were able to now have control. Say, hey, listen, if something's encrypted, you can't even try to decrypt it. Okay, pretty big deal. So there's a whole lot to this whole vigilante thing. And someone is at it again. In this case, we found a researcher who has found something you just don't really see very often, outside that Sony thing. But it's booby-trapped files. Yeah, there's these files that are out there on the internet, on a bunch of torrent sites and others that are pirated software, and they have a booby trap inside of them. Now, the pirated software is typically things like Microsoft Windows or all of their different software, right? Word and you name it, all the way across the line. They also, by the way, have put some of this malware into games, because there's a lot of people that run games and they grab these cracked games from the internet. So we're talking about bootleg software. And so what this person or people or whoever it is doing, according to Sophos Labs principal researcher, his name's Andrew Brandt, is getting these people to install this software that has a booby trap, and that what it does is you think you're just installing the game or whatever it might be, but in reality you're installing software that sends the file name that was executed to an attacker-controlled server, so it knows, oh, you're trying to run Microsoft Word, and it sends along your IP address of your computers. And then what it does is this vigilante software, it tries to modify the victim's computers so they can no longer access some 1,000 other pirate sites, like the piratebay.com, which is a very popular site out there. So this is obviously not your typical malware, not at all. And they are doing the same type of thing that Sony did way back in the day, modifying your computer so that you cannot do something that may be legal. It may be most of the time illegal, hard to say, but in reality, they're modifying it without you knowing. It's a very, very big deal. So people are using software kind of like this vigilante software to steal stuff. Usually it's passwords or maybe your keystrokes or cookies or your intellectual property access. The people are even using advertising networks, to deliver software that will mine cryptocurrency for them. Okay, but those are all theft. That's what the motive is, but not in this case. These samples really only did a few things, and none of them follow the motive for malware criminals. It's fascinating. He had a thing that he posted over there on Twitter, kind of talking about it. But once the victims executed this Trojan file, it gets sent out to a server, and I'm sure the FBI is tracking down this server. It's onefleur.com. Yeah, impronounceable. And it's not the one Fisher, which is the name of a cloud storage provider, but it's pretty close to it. And it sends it out. I'm looking at the list of all of these websites that it tries to block by going into your host's file. But it's an interesting way to approach it, isn't it? Frankly, by mapping the domains for all of these torrent sites and pirate sites to your local host, the malware is making sure that your computer can't access those websites. Okay. Anyways, if it happens to you, just go in and edit the host's file. It's really quite that simple. All right, stick around, everybody. But while you're waiting, go ahead, go online, go to craigpeterson.com. Once you're there, you can easily subscribe to my newsletter and keep up to date on everything. craigpeterson.com.